today about why we're going to talk about these two pieces. We're going to pull in some strategies for you, and we're going to kind of weave all of this together, because the goal is that anybody that's watching will be able to go home and maybe have a better understanding and maybe have some tools in your toolbox to help your child.
So some of the things that we're going to talk about tonight, I'm going to outline what we're going to go over. Why did we pick sensory and communication? Because we feel like those two things are so important. They're such big components of help us to interpret our environment and the people that we are communicating with, and being able to engage in activities in just the world around us. So what we're going to talk about tonight is engagement, what that is, and how we use it, and sensory processing, and we'll go over what that is and different components to it. Executive function, what that actually means, and some different components of that and how we use it. And then language and communication. We're also going to review actually there's a little bit more. I know most people know what language and communication is, but there's more than what we think of when we think of that. So, and finally, we're going to try and use all of those pieces together in some examples to help you transition from one activity to another with your children.
So, really important piece is engagement. Really, really important. So what is engagement? It requires active participation of both parties who are in an activity, okay? So activities got to include more than one or more people, right? It is a really fundamental building block to learning. So if you think about having a conversation with somebody or trying to learn something, if you're not engaged with the material or with the professor or with the teacher, you're probably not going to really, really, truly learn that thing. So we've got to be engaged. Engagement is really, really affected by sensory processing, executive functioning, and language. And it really, really aids in developing healthy relationships. So starting right at the moment of birth, we start learning how to engage. So this is how it works. It's engagement, we build relationships, and then we have communication and active participation.
Okay, so sensory processing, what does that mean? It's our brain's ability and our body's ability to interpret the world around us, and then for us to be able to use that in communicating and interacting with our environment. So most of us know about our 5 senses. In therapy, we add 2 more. So I'm just going to kind of go through them. So tactile is our sense of touch. We use our skin to give us information. Smell, we use our nose to give us information about what's going on around us. Sight, is how we use our eyes. Now sight, along with sight goes vision, and there's so much more than just 20/20 vision or not 20/20 vision, whether you need glasses or not. There's the ability of your eyes to team together. There's the ability to focus on one thing that's far away and then come to something that's close. Then there's also taste, which we use our tongues and our mouth for. And then hearing, obviously we use our ears to do that. Proprioception, that is the ability of our body to interpret through our joints and compression how much force we're using to affect the environment, or to tell us like how we're moving and how much force from the environment is going through us. And then vestibular is our movement sense, and that is located in the inner ear, and it affects our balance and our coordination. So when sensory processing doesn't work correctly, it can negatively affect our behavior. So how does it not work correctly? So the person who initially started talking about this called it a traffic jam in your brain, basically, your nerves inputs. So you can either have too much and be overstimulated or sensory avoiding, and that can lead to a meltdown or somebody just trying to avoid or avoid any kind of interaction. Or you can be sensory seeking, which means that you're understimulated with your sensations. And so those are the people that that might talk really, really loud and not realize that they're talking loud, or they might spin around in circles because they need a little bit of extra input. Or they might run and crash into things because they need that extra sensation to help them understand their environment. So those things can be interpreted as really poor behaviors at times. We're like, well, why is that person throwing a temper tantrum? When really it's just that they're overstimulated and their body has stopped processing. Or, this person's too rough, but really they just need that extra input. So they're seeking that through the extra force where they're running into things. Oh, so let me kind of transition into this. So our sensory processing is kind of a key where, like, in our stages of development. So, as you're learning as a baby learns to interpret their environment, it's so important that they're getting that information because it allows them to then start the building blocks. It allows them to develop coordination. It allows them to work with both sides of their body and then one side of their body apart from the other side of the body. It helps them to problem solve. It helps them to work through all of that stuff, which then leads to executive functioning.
Absolutely. And a lot of these things, just piggybacking too on what Lisa was saying, a lot of these things that we're going to talk about tonight are all maybe kind of under the surface. So what we see is the behavior. And I'm using that in quotes. What we see is the behavior. We see a child who's running into something. We see a child who is quote unquote not listening. But what's happening underneath are all these skills that we're talking about. And if we start to target and support the skills that are going on underneath the behavior, then we can really, really support that child and help them really communicate and participate in their world. So executive functioning is all your brain, okay? It happens up in this front part of your brain. It has to do with memory, attention, self-control, planning, problem solving, emotional regulation, self-awareness, okay? Executive functioning is kind of a buzzword in some circles right now, but it's a really, really critical skill for everything, and it pulls together language and sensory processing pretty closely. Executive functioning skills impact our ability to engage and relate to others. So if you think about being able to pay attention to an interaction with another person, being able to control yourself from maybe running into that person or controlling your emotional regulation, it also affects our ability to break down tasks, plan, prioritize, complete activities. Maybe you might see a child who's having difficulty with finishing their homework, right? It also really affects language, understanding concepts, being able to sequence and understand the sequence of events, and maintaining that emotional regulation, and so much more. Again, this happens right up in this part of our brain. There's so many neurons here and so much important stuff and so many connections to other pieces of our brains as well.
So kind of what Callie was mentioning before, there's, we kind of listed some examples of things that you might see when somebody has a deficit in their executive functioning. So what might that look like? Well, they can't finish their homework, or, you're talking to them and all of a sudden their eyes are wandering over to the side, or you've put a task in front of them and they're doing this, but then they're starting to do this task over here too. And then they're on their phone, or then they're, so lack of being able to just do one thing and focus on it, or not completing what they're doing. Difficulty transitioning from one activity to another. When they're unable to kind of break down those tasks or prioritize things, it's difficult to say, okay, I've got to stop doing this right now because I really need to get this done. Sometimes you can see like task paralysis, or the inability to even start a task because it's too big and they can't figure out how to break things down. That can be even something as simple as getting dressed in the morning. For a child who's just learning how to do those things, that's a lot of steps that you have to sequence through. Do I put my hands through my shirt first? Do I put my head through my shirt first? Do I make sure it's the right direction first? There are things that if you don't have a problem with executive functioning, then you don't even think about normally, because it all just happens in your brain automatically. But when your child is having to think through each of these things, it can be an exhausting process. So that's kind of why we picked the picture that's up there on the slide. Is just like, this is kind of what that brain looks like. Instead of that nice stepped ordered, like, this is how I want to do things and this is the problem, it's kind of all intermingled, and it gets really, really confusing. And then a lot of times you'll see children just shut down.
And so the communication language piece of all of this, I think it's really important to hammer on that it's not just what you say, but what you understand. So a lot of times, especially with kids, we think about what words are they saying, right? But it is so, so much more than that. Communication impacts every part of the way that you interact with and understand the world. Communication skills, they help you not only convey your immediate needs, but your emotional and psychological needs. They help you know what directions to follow. Should I stop right now? Should I stop at this street corner? To understand what's coming next, to understand inferences, make changes in your world. So it's not just words, but it's glances, right? It's physical communication. It's gestures, right? Maybe we're telling somebody to stop this way. Maybe we're telling them to stop this way, right? Maybe we're kind of joking with them a little bit, right? Maybe we're using just a sound. All of these things are such a critical part of communication and language, and it pulls from all of these executive functioning and sensory processing skills.
So let's go ahead and talk about some strategies using all of the stuff that we kind of just went over. So we're going to talk about some strategies to transition from one thing to another, and then some strategies to keep attention. So transitions can be hard for all kinds of kids, adults, people in general. So transitioning is the ability to move from one activity to another, or from one place to another. So how do we know that transitions are difficult for a child? A lot of that is our ability to just observe what's going on and really kind of focus in on some of the details. We need to look at not only their behavior, but maybe look at their face, look at, are they doing this weird kind of movement? Like, that kind of comes up every time they have this bad behavior. We call those tics, but like, is it, they move their head to the side, or is it that they're grabbing their hair or covering their ears or something like that? That's a sign of stress, that something is lost in the system. Either their senses aren't being interpreted right, or that they're having a hard time with the communication. So if they're just flat out refusing to do something, is that a behavior, or is it that there's a reason that they don't want to do that? Does it hurt them in some way? And then if they're slow to transition from one thing to another, if they don't want to stop what they're doing, again, like, let's look, is it the behavior, or is this something consistent that they're having some difficulty with?
Uh-oh.
So
I think we're having a moment of there we go. I think I can hear you now. There we go. Okay.
So for our transition strategies, something that we can look at is that, like I was saying, like, understand that what our child's needs are, and kind of knowing, if your child has some sensory issues, it's going to become evident because, there's going to be things they don't like. Like if they're hypersensitive to the things, then, there's going to be clothes they refuse to wear. There's going to be times they don't want to be touched. There's going to be sounds that they avoid. Maybe they don't like loud areas. Maybe they don't like bright areas. Maybe they don't like hot or cold. You're going to see a couple of different things that you're like, oh, well, I don't recognize that from myself, maybe, or, maybe your other kids don't do the same thing. So those are good ways to kind of know, maybe they're getting overstimulated, or does my kid have to run everywhere? Do they have to slam into the couch? Do they have to spin around in circles during the day just randomly? Are they always yelling? Do they burp randomly because they think that they just need that input? Maybe it's not a behavior. Maybe they're just looking for that extra sound. So those are just some kind of ways to understand, like, okay, well, maybe this is something different. When I talk to my child and I tell them something, do they continually do something even though it's not what I'm asking them to do? Maybe they're not understanding how you're communicating with them. Maybe they're misinterpreting something. So there's something there. Like every time I make this face, my child reacts very poorly to it. Well, maybe they're misunderstanding that nonverbal communication with you as well. So that kind of leads into the second part, is to make sure that we're communicating clearly. So in order to do that, maybe if you're actually, I'm going to let Callie talk about that.
So communicate clearly, right? That means different things for different people and different children. Sometimes it means that we need to use visual supports, right? We might need a picture. We might need an object to help us understand, hey, this is what is going to happen next, right? We need to use structured language. So if we can be consistent and structured in what we say when we're transitioning, it can help a child kind of pre-plan, right? Oh, I get it. I've done this before. I've heard this before. Okay. Makes it easier for me to understand and to transition. And an important question is, with our communication, is this transition necessary? All right. So some transitions are natural and some are forced. Sometimes it's because we think, I need to get this done, right? All of us parents know there are things that you need to do and you've got to get them done. However, it might not be a great time for your child. And yes, we have schedules, but could we maybe do that at a different time? Could we maybe help them more naturally transition into the next activity. In life, we have different transitions, right? Lisa will talk sometimes about waking up, right? There's a natural transition. It happens. It's not okay, you're asleep and now you must wake up right now, right? It's, oh, we're awake and now here we are, right? And then we can talk about a forced transition, which would be like, oh, we have to go to the grocery store right now. You're playing with your Legos. I'm going to pick you up and put you in your car seat in the car and we're going, right? I have animals. I like to play with my animals and do things outside, right? And if somebody came up to me and was like, hey, now you're going to go to the grocery store right now, and moved me in that direction, it would be hard as a functioning adult to do that, right? And Lisa's going to talk next about the, pre-planning these transitions.
So sometimes if we, like Callie was talking about, with those forced transitions, if we kind of plan those things out and we're like, oh, you know what, I've got to get to the grocery store and it closes at this time, and we've got to be here at this time. So I need to go during this time. So then if your child is starting into an activity, so they're sitting down to play with their Legos, let them know at the beginning, hey, I see that you're playing with your Legos. That's great. We're going to have to go to the grocery store in about a half an hour, or if it's, I guess probably not right now, but, one of the best things that I had learned with my kids is at the McDonald's play places, right? They're running around, they're playing with all the other kids. And just to tell them, okay, it's time to go, there's always this big, huge drama and they don't want to leave. But if you tell them, hey, we're going to go in 5 minutes, so finish up playing with your friends, and then you remind them, okay, now we've got 2 minutes. It lets them know a little bit and be able to plan how to transition for themselves. So you're kind of building that executive functioning in your child, a little bit with the planning part too. But it also lets things go a lot smoother. So
I think too, just to jump in, you can involve your child in that. So maybe it's leaving the McDonald's play place, and you can say, depending on what's going on in your life, you can say, hey, we have to leave. Would you like to leave in 5 minutes or 8 minutes? Or would you like to have your last activity be the slide or the ball pit, right? They can have some input in this, and it's going to look different for every kind of activity. Maybe they get to pre-plan what they do next, right? We have to leave. We're going home. What toys do you want to play with when we get home? Let's plan that out so we have something to look forward to.
Yeah. So, and I think those are perfect examples where, like, when we're talking about letting your child have input, it's important for them to feel like they can make decisions. And we're not saying let them run the show, and kind of set your boundaries, but giving them the option, okay, it's time for bed. Would you like to brush your teeth first, or would you like to pick out your PJs? Something like that, where those two activities have to happen, but maybe they prefer one over the other, and maybe they'll do better doing one first. So, and then the other thing is to make sure that you're setting clear expectations. So if you do say, okay, we're leaving in 5 minutes, then, don't give them 10 minutes to go, keep those expectations clear, so that they know what's coming. And, if there's, let them be clear with them, like, okay, we're going to eat dinner now. So I need you to come to the table and I need you to sit down. Some children are much more literal than others. So if you say, okay, it's time for dinner, okay, but they're sitting there still. Well, they don't understand that you mean that you want them to come to the table. So sometimes it's important to say, okay, it's dinner time. I need you to come to the table. I need you to sit in your chair. Or I need you to wash your hands, and I need you to come over to the table and sit in your chair. And you need to go through those steps with your child so they understand exactly what you want from them.
Absolutely. And so we're going to talk next about attention, because it's a piece that kind of pulls all this together a little bit, right? It's one of those executive functioning skills. And in day-to-day activities with our kids, attention plays a hand in sticking with activities, right? These are things that Lisa and I hear parents talk about a lot. My kid doesn't stick with activities, having trouble staying focused on tasks and completing them appropriately, right? So how do we know attention might be difficult? Again, incomplete activities, signs of stress. That's going to be different for every child. They're doing multiple projects at once, right? Maybe they have Legos and they have a train set and they're mixing slime or goo or whatever we're calling it now. They're doing so many things and none of them are really done, but they're still really interested in all of them, right? We might need some support in terms of attention. So when we're looking at those strategies, we're going to first talk about environmental arrangement. Do we have too much out? Is there too much to go through? When we have a difficulty with attention, if there's a ton around, it's overwhelming. I don't know who has been to the grocery store and been to the deodorant aisle and seen the absolute full length of deodorant, right? There's so much and it's a lot, right? Even typically developing adults look at that and go, I don't even know what kind of deodorant to buy, right? So when we pull things down and get the most developmentally appropriate activities out for our kids, we give them some options, but not so much that it's overwhelming. That can really, really help attention. The goal is to be able to help kids be successful in maybe more structured environments or easier environments, or however you want to say it, and then help them build and be successful more and more and more places and more environments, right? And again, choosing developmentally appropriate activities. If it's not developmentally appropriate, then of course we're going to not attend to it because it's way beyond, or maybe just a little bit too far behind what we're developmentally ready for. And Lisa's going to talk next about posture because this is something that's really, really interesting. And we think it's something that gets maybe missed or forgotten or misinterpreted a lot.
So when somebody is when a child has some core strength issues or some postural issues, sometimes, instead of sitting up and talking or completing a task, you'll see them, head down on the table or laying across, or maybe sitting over on their side, or fidgeting a lot. And we think, wow, they really just aren't paying attention. And sometimes it's not so much that they aren't paying attention, but they just don't have the strength to sit just and be unsupported. So if somebody's got neck weakness or something, they might have to sit like this, or if they have a visual problem, because sometimes there's eye weakness that's involved, and they might have to sit like this to see right. It doesn't mean that they're not paying attention to you. It just means that that's kind of an adaptation that they've learned to try and help them get through that activity. So kind of the gold standard that people talk about with posture is it's 90-90-90. So you want their feet supported on the floor because it gives them that sensory input. You want their knees bent at 90 degrees, their hips bent at 90 degrees, because it just gives them good support, and it encourages the good upright posture of your upper body so that you can then focus on what's in front of you. Now, that doesn't always work for all children, and you've got some children that, like I was saying, like that have core weakness, or they have they're built differently, or, they need to make some adaptations because they can't maintain that posture. So if that's the case, you need to find, what supports them best. But in general, having input through their feet and, input through their bottom, or however they're being supported, if they're on their hands and knees, that input can help sensory wise to be able to get them to focus a little bit better. So that's just kind of where we are at with the whole, that's kind of how posture plays into attention as well.
And before we pop into talking about how these strategies look in the real world, I just am going to briefly talk about, how do we know that maybe there's a communication difficulty with communication as a piece of all of this. Good hints are that maybe we do have a child who is seeming to be sensorily regulated. All these other pieces seem to be fitting together, however, or maybe they're not, but they're not seeming to understand verbal information. They're not seeming to understand maybe gestures or physical movements. And they're potentially, even especially in older kids, if we're looking at this, they're just not expressing themselves in maybe what we would consider an appropriate way, right? Their communication might be really abrupt, or it might be really short and angry, but that might be because they don't have anything else in their bucket to say, right? Especially when things are stressful, kids are going to reach for whatever is the easiest, right? If transitions are stressful, they're going to go to their language bucket and pull out, "Stop it," right? That might be a really easy thing, or just "No," right? And if you try to talk to them, they might not be able to fully explain to you, well, why don't you want to go to dinner? Why don't you want to, I don't know, go to McDonald's, to go to the play place right there, right? And maybe they're just going, I don't know, right? Might be misinterpreted as being some words that I very much dislike, but lazy, right? Might be misinterpreted as a child who's being lazy or just doesn't care, right? But they just might not have the communication skills, and they might need some support to be able to communicate. And maybe that's not just verbally, but maybe we need a device. Maybe we need the people around us to be listening to our nonverbal communication, right? That's absolutely valid. So thinking too, as we look at all of these things, it's a piece of all of it, right? So now let's go to what's it look like in the real world, because that's what matters, right? And I think, so first we've got child is watching TV and you've got dinner ready. I'm sure most people have experienced this, or breakfast or lunch or something ready, right? How do we help them transition? What do we do? And I'm going to let Lisa kind of get us started at least.
Okay, so some things that we can do is, if your child is, not having any trouble with their sensory stuff, then just, again, communicating clearly and maybe giving them a little bit of time, advance notice. Hey, dinner's going to be ready in about 5 minutes. I need you to come to the table. But again, making sure that you're communicating exactly what you want. Or, hey, dinner's going to be ready. I would like it if you would help me to set the table. Can you please get the plates out? Just making sure that you're being clear about what exactly your expectations are. And because your child is not going to assume that you're going to want them to do more than you asked for them to do. So, so I guess that is kind of the first place to start with that. Next is, does your child have a sensory issue? Because TV has a lot of sensory input. So between, the blue light, the screen stuff, the colors, the constantly moving scenes, the sound, there's a lot of input going in there. And so that can overstimulate children. So again, if you've got that overstimulation, then they go into that avoidance. So like you're adding one more thing for them to do, and they are stimulated to the point where they can't handle that thought. So you get a no, or I don't want to, or, that kind of thing. So sometimes it's, okay, we need a little bit of time. Let's turn the volume down a little bit, or mute it so that it's quiet, and then we can add that extra. Okay, we're gonna have dinner in 5 minutes. I need you to be able to come, or the other thing would be, if they're in a bright room, you might need to turn the lights down and just kind of give them, and if there's a blanket, or if they have a way to kind of decompress, they might need that. Now, if they are sensory seeking and they're not getting enough because they're just sitting there watching this input, then they might need an activity to get to the table. You might need to have them jump up and down 5 times before you head into the dining room. Or, those are the kids where it's, they're going to love if you give them that chore to do. Like, come with me, let's get the silverware and let's set the table. Because it gives them a chance to be active and help. So just kind of figuring out, again, being observant and watching and kind of seeing how your child is reacting to those transitions, and then figuring out how to give them that activity of whether they need a little bit of a calming time or a little bit of more activity to help them transition into that dinner setting.
And I think it's so important to really think about, like, what does our communication come across to our child? So, right, there's a difference between walking in when your kid is watching TV and saying, I'm muting it, we're having dinner in 5 minutes, as opposed to, hey, dinner is in 5 minutes. Let's turn the TV down a little bit so we can get ourselves ready, right? There's a difference, right? And it's important to kind of check in with ourselves before we do these kind of support activities, right? We're trying to support our kids so that they can be successful, but it's important to check in with ourselves because we might not even think about it, right? Sometimes you're just going. I got to get this done, right? And we don't even realize, like, we're just steamrolling through this, right? We don't want to do that. We want to take the moment for ourselves to check in, to get ourselves together, and then move forward, right, with some of these strategies.
So, and I can tell you just from personal experience, it's definitely a learning and growing thing. But I have a child who we struggled for years and years to try and get to sit down at the table, period. And we couldn't ever get her to sit down. And she was pretty defiant about it until we figured out that the sound from the forks scraping on the plates while we were eating was a sound that she was not able to tolerate, that sent her over her threshold. So it literally just took me buying plastic plates that we could sit at instead of the ceramic ones that we had. And it solved the problem. We have no problem getting her to sit down at the table. So sometimes it's like, I'm trying all of these things. I'm saying the things I'm supposed to. I'm doing the activities that I'm supposed to, and it's still not working. Sometimes there's just that, and it's not easy because children, don't know that what they experience isn't necessarily what everybody else experiences. So they're not going to, she didn't know to tell me, well, I can't handle that sound, because she didn't realize that it was different from anybody else. So she didn't understand why it was bothering her. So it took a little bit of talking through, well, what's the problem? What makes you not want to sit down? So sometimes, and she was old enough at that point where we could have that conversation. But that's where that trying to just kind of step back and be patient and be observant comes in.
And that's such a beautiful example of, when I was talking earlier about here's the behavior, right? If we just look at, oh, this behavior is happening, the kid won't come to the table, right? Okay. However, there's something going on underneath, right? So if we just try to somehow push and force and reward and cajole this child to come to the table, we're missing this piece. And right when Lisa figured this piece out, the behavior didn't have to be addressed. It once this the piece that's missing is supported and or just handled or taken away, right? Then the behavior, it's not there anymore. And that's what we really want to do. It's a little bit different way of looking at things, other than, I say, I'm going to say what I want my child to do and they're going to do it, right? Well, a lot of times there's something underneath. And sometimes if we just address the behavior, this thing that's causing the behavior is going to pop up in other places. So maybe we somehow get them to come to the table, right? Without addressing this. Well, then maybe all of a sudden they don't want to get in the car, right? Because there's a cause, right? And it's going to pop up somewhere else. And if we're just addressing the very surface behavior, we're missing something, and we're missing a really valuable opportunity to help and support our kids. And whether this reason is their communication skills, their sensory skills, their executive functioning, whatever it is, we owe it to them to look at what's underneath. And so I think we're going to talk next about, this
getting ready for school in the morning.
Challenging, sometimes ritual of getting ready for school.
So I guess is it okay if I just kind of start with this?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So getting ready for school, generally that's, waking the kids up in the morning, right? So I think that kind of is your basis to start. Like, does your kid respond well to an alarm blaring at them, or does that set them over the edge? Do they need you to come wake them up? Are they somebody who's going to be needed to, I've got to wake them up once and I need to give them, 5 minutes to get out of bed? Do I need to give them an immediate activity? Hey, it's time to get up. I need you to get up and out of bed and let's head to the bathroom, or let's do this, so kind of figuring out that will help to set things on the right path to begin with. But then, do they need that little extra input in the morning? If your child is like a sensory seeking child and they don't have the proprioceptive input, getting dressed in the morning is going to be torture, because they're not going to know where their body's at to be able to put their clothes on. So a simple way to help with that would be have them do some stretches. Reach up as high as you can, reach down and touch the floor, reach over to the side as far as you can. It just gives them that little bit of extra input that, okay, well, I know where all my joints are at now. Now I can get my clothes, now I can get my body in my clothes.
I think, adults do this all the time, but we're adults, right? We are like, oh, I know that I need to do this, right? If I'm going to get moving, personally, if I'm going to get moving, I need to roll out of bed right as soon as I wake up, feet hit the floor, and start moving. Because if I'm just kind of, I'm going to lay in bed for way too long, right? Kids, though, need us to help them figure it out. They don't need us to force them. They need us to help support them and help them figure this stuff out so that eventually, goal is independence, right? We want, in however much time, we want you to be able to do these things by yourself, right? But if we don't give them the support that they need to start with, they're going to be jumped. The bridge is too far. It's too far of a jump. And I'm sorry, Lisa, I think I cut in a little bit.
That's okay. That's okay. So, so when, if they are the opposite, if they have trouble with all of the sensory stuff and that overstimulates them, then, maybe we don't want to turn the lights on when they first get up because that's going to be too much input for them. Maybe we just need to kind of guide them into, okay, let's move around a little bit and let's, if that's too much for them, then maybe picking their clothes out in the morning is going to be too much for them too. So maybe that's something that you need to do the night before so that they have it there and they know. So on that subject as well, if you're having trouble getting your child dressed, is it the activity and the time that you're doing it, or is it the clothes themselves? Do they have some sensory issues with the clothing that they're wearing? Because sometimes seams, sometimes fabrics can be an issue with kids as well, and they can't handle putting those things on. So is there something that they prefer to wear? Is there something that they don't want to wear? Maybe it's just the feeling of the clothes that they don't like. So that's another part of it. Routine can also be really, really important for kids, especially when they're struggling with stuff. So, okay, so this is how we're going to do it every morning. This is how I'm going to come in and I'm going to help you get up and get your day started. And every morning you're going to get dressed before you have breakfast, and you're going to have breakfast before you get to do whatever activity, and that way they can kind of establish that thing, their own routine, and you can let them take part in, establishing that routine too. Like, so when you get up in the morning, do you want to put your clothes on first? Do you want to brush your teeth first? Do you want to, do you want to, let's get out of bed and let's do our stretches. And then do you need to go right into the bathroom, or, should we get your glasses on first? Should we, so just kind of work with them and figure out what routine works the best, and then try and keep that a routine, keep that kind of consistent for them, so that they get that. And like Callie was saying before, because the goal is independence. So if we can figure out what works best for them, then let's stick with it so that they know how to do it going on by themselves.
Absolutely. And so another one that parents talk to us about a lot is, you're at a family meal and you're trying to have some kind of family conversation and your child is not responding, or they're not responding in the way that you think that they should, right? Sometimes first we need to manage our own expectations, right? Because a child might not be ready developmentally to participate in a conversation the way that maybe we have this picture in our minds sometimes, right? And sometimes we got to reassess what that picture looks like, right? Because we have to support and love and help the child that's in front of us, not this picture that's in our mind of what we want all the time. It's a good goal, right? But it's not always what's sitting in front of us. So general things are a lot of times questions don't do what we think that they do. So if we have a kid who's having difficulty communicating and we're trying to ask them lots and lots of questions, what did you do today? Did you play with Johnny? Was Johnny nice to you? Did you go down the slide? Right? Things like this. They don't do what we think they do. child doesn't have a generative, robust, strong communication system, it's going to be difficult for them to answer those questions. It's a lot of pressure, right? They might end up getting dysregulated in terms of their sensory system because it's so much pressure. They might start to do some of those refusals, right? They might just shut down. Lots of things can happen. So when we're trying to have conversations, especially with a child who's having difficulty with communication, we really want to go with statements, right? So if I'm going to talk about my day, oh man, this morning I woke up kind of late. That was tough. Oh, right? I'm going to see what they do, right? Depending on the child's level, they might be going, oh, right? And I'm going to play off of them. Yeah, mommy was tired. Oh, right? We need to meet our kids where they are. And my biggest thing with this is for really any child who's having difficulty, it's questions aren't what they don't do what we think they do over and over and over. They don't. And so we also want to look at the other pieces, like Lisa talked about the posture. Are we having a hard time having a conversation because we don't even know where we are in space? There's this horrible noise of a fork on a plate. So how can I have a conversation if I'm in overload, right? Maybe there's too many people at the table right now and it's too hard for me to focus. Maybe this food is so gross to me, or it's difficult for me to chew, or it scares me when I swallow it, right? All of these things can impact that. So it's not just a conversation, right? It's the whole world around your child that we have to look at. And one of the first things that we talked about is understanding your child. We got to figure out, what are they amazing at and how can we use that to help them be successful in this world? And let's deal with the other stuff, just compensate sometimes while we work on the other pieces. It's what helps kids be the most successful long term. And so this is my soapbox. And I know it's, when should you seek a professional opinion if you have a concern? So if there are any parents out there that are going, yeah, I kind of have had this worry and I don't know what to do. If you have that concern and you have this little thing that's kind of tingling around and you're like, man, days are so hard. I don't understand why this just doesn't work. Why doesn't my kid listen? Why can't, all of these challenges, find somebody to help you. Consult with an occupational therapist, consult with a physical therapist, consult with a speech language pathologist. Best practice is not to wait anymore. Years ago, that was best practice. Absolutely. It was just wait till they're 3, wait till they're 5, they'll grow out of it. However, we know that brains are, they can grow and develop and do so many incredible and wonderful things, especially that birth to 5 range. But there's so much growth and development that can happen even to 26. Our brains don't fully develop until they're 26. And even after that, old dog, new tricks, you can teach an old dog new tricks. You just have to have the right strategies. So there are many pediatricians and grandmothers and well-meaning friends and Bob on the street that just says, oh, your kid's fine, right? But we know we have tons and tons of research that shows that if we can get in early, we can make a lot more progress and we can really help support your kid. And I think what's really, really critical is that worst case scenario, you have a concern. most of PT, OT, and speech evals are play-based for kids. Worst case scenario, your kid gets to play with a fun new person for an hour or two, and you know that everything is fine and you get to go home. The other side is you get support, right? There's no real worst, that bad outcome, right? And I think Lisa has a really compelling comment about this, not waiting.
Yeah. So I have a daughter who is on the autistic spectrum, and we knew that there was something wrong, and things kind of popped up from the time that she was 2 and on, and we would tell the doctor about it, and the doctor's like, "Oh, she'll grow out of it. Oh, she'll grow out of it." And she is able to talk and communicate, and she has friends, and she's in normal school, so they weren't concerned about that. But what they didn't realize is that when she would come home, she could no longer function. She was not able to communicate or interact with her family, and things were pretty bad, and it was to the point where she was in a ball on the floor and couldn't function with the rest of us. And at that point, I was like, you know what, this is too much, and we've got to go beyond the doctor because we're not getting the help we need. So, at 12 years old, we got her finally diagnosed, and we started to get some intervention. And we started to see things going so much better, and those transitions and the interactions with siblings and everything got so much better. But in the meantime, in those first 12 years, my other children have been affected by those interactions with their sister and by the things that happened when she wasn't coping. So not only do we have to deal with trying to make things better and make things work for her, but also with some of the hurt and some of the issues that were created with the siblings as well, and not to mention her parents. So, so it's just a whole world of just things go so much better. My son, we were able to get in. We noticed a couple of different things with him right away, and we were able to get him help right away. And he's 5 now, and he's thriving, and he's able to interact with his siblings well, and he can transition from one place to another. And it's so much smoother and so much better. And yes, they're 2 different people, and he might have been able to do those things easier anyways. But we don't have to deal with the what if. He's getting that help that he's needing, and he's growing by leaps and bounds. So there's a big difference there. So yes, absolutely what Callie said, like if you have a concern, the good thing is that speech therapy, I believe, and I know physical therapy, you don't need a doctor's order for. So if your pediatrician isn't suggesting them, it's okay. You can go see them anyways. But even with occupational therapy, for us, we do need a doctor's order for that, but we are able to usually call and talk to the doctors and explain why. And so we have a good deal of success being able to get those orders too. So, if it's just good to reach out, and maybe even if it's just, I need to understand this a little bit better, you can get some information and support, like Callie was saying.
And so if anybody has any questions that's watching this, and you're in our local area, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can find both of our contact information if you just search for our practice name. So Talk On, and we're in Kent, and Purpose Driven Therapy in Stowe. And please don't hesitate, because even, the more that we can do to help our kids, the better. And that's what we're here for.
So thank you for joining us, and we hope that you are able to have some help from the information that you received tonight.
Thank you all so much.